Hello and welcome to the first episode of this channel that I have named Contra Apologetics. It's a play on words made up of the word contra, meaning against or to oppose or opposite, and apologetics, because I am against apologetics. I oppose apologetics. I opposite apologetics. And they're blended together, you see, to make a cool name, because I'm cool. I'm cool. Now, if you don't know, the term apologetics comes from the Greek word apologia, which means to make a defense or give a reasoned statement or argument. And this explains why Plato's Apology is not about an apology, but is an account of Socrates defending himself in court against accusations of impiety and corrupting the youth. Thus, in a technical sense, anytime someone defends a view or a position, they're technically giving an apology or doing apologetics. Now, you might be wondering, hey, why on earth would you oppose that? Isn't that a good thing? Are you against defending your views rationally? And of course, the answer is absolutely not. I am not against that. In fact, I'm very much for it. And I myself will often be engaging in what could technically be called apologetics. What I oppose, and what this channel is meant to criticize, is the practice or discipline that goes by that same name. So within the last 30 years or so, it's become kind of popular to be an apologist. And this basically amounts to identifying oneself as a defender of some position. That is, one makes it their very purpose or mission in life to defend some conclusion at all costs. And this is especially prominent in Christian circles or in Christianity today, where one can even earn a degree in apologetics. And very many people actually make it their profession. And I think that's bad and honestly kind of goofy. Now, some of you could perhaps see why that might be the case, and maybe some of you completely agree with me already. But some might still wonder why I'm against this kind of apologetics, and enough so to make an entire channel devoted to it. Well, you see, it all began a long, long time ago when I was a younger lad back in the day.
5 hours later.
And that's why I've come to feel quite strongly about apologetics. No, but seriously, I did grow up in a devout Christian home, and I myself was a devout believer from a pretty young age. And towards the end of high school, I became quite enamored with apologetics myself. And I had always been interested in the how and why of things. And so naturally, I wanted to better understand why Christianity was true and to be able to explain why Christianity is, why my beliefs were correct to other people. And I remember one of the very first books I read, if not the first, was actually The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel. And at the time, that brought a sense of great assurance to me that Christianity was true and well-founded. And after graduating, I actually went on to get a biblical studies degree. And my desire was to actually do apologetics, or to become an apologist of some sort. And I spent many hours debating atheists online in forums, because this was before Facebook was even a thing. Now, the more I studied apologetics, the more I came into contact with general philosophy and critical thinking, which I absolutely loved. And although I felt pretty confident in my atheist debating abilities, my interest in philosophy and exposure to thinking outside my bubble led to what I would call the first subtle cracks in my foundation. And toward the end of my biblical studies degree, I started to harbor some serious doubts and concerns about various doctrines and beliefs within Christianity. And much of the answers and the evidence and the defenses that are typically given for Christianity didn't seem quite as strong as I was initially led to believe. In some ways, I feel that I started a process of deconstruction before it became I don't want to call it a fad, before it became a trend, or before it became cool or prominent, maybe. One thing in particular that nagged me quite often was that religion seems to be one of the few areas in life that we seem to believe first and only then seek reasons and defenses after that. And of course, that seems completely backwards. Of course, that doesn't mean Christianity is false, but it was rather concerning to me. So for a time, this season of doubt passed, but of course, it would recur and come back stronger each time. And in response, every time in response, I would read lots of apologetics, and I would actually pray fervently, but there was just never any response. So things just sort of got worse and worse. And more I found that the answers that apologists gave were entirely lacking. And eventually, I do remember a point where my faith just kind of slipped away as I descended into what I would say was agnosticism first, and then finally into atheism, where I am taking atheism to mean a belief that God does not exist. Now, to be clear, I don't claim to know that God does not exist. I would say it's more of a suspicion or something I suspect. The point is, as someone who started out in favor of apologetics and wanting to actually be an apologist, having interacted with it all throughout this process that I went through, I've come to have a very low view of apologetics. And here's why. Although apologists present themselves like philosophers, I've come to see them as far more akin to lawyers or salesmen or politicians. I know it may sound harsh, but I think that they are actually modern-day sophists. And this is in large part due to the fact that apologists basically start with a conclusion that they want to be true or think is true, and then they work backwards and devote their entire lives to defending it, basically at all costs, even going so far as to see it as a battle or a war for souls. Now, we all know that humans are biased. All humans are biased. I'm biased. Everyone is biased. But becoming an apologist essentially amplifies that off the charts. It is to put the bias front and center. You are literally biased towards a particular conclusion, and your job is to work towards defending that conclusion. And of course, this doesn't itself mean that theism or even Christianity is false, but it does place a huge barrier in the way of really coming to know the truth or knowing if it's the truth. Further, because this kind of apologetics must arrange the evidence so as to lead to a particular conclusion, it's mainly aimed at simply coming up with answers to any possible objection. It then encourages basically thoughtless regurgitation by those believers who want those answers to help in their conversations, to help bolster their own faith. I've even seen apologists like William Lane Craig, for instance, who just recommends memorizing 4 or 5 arguments that you can just throw at a skeptic in a conversation in order to counter the claim that there's no evidence for God. And I'm not saying there is no evidence for God, but the idea is to just memorize a bunch of arguments. That is not sufficient to know that there is good evidence for God, even if you can rattle off a bunch of names like the Kalam cosmological argument. Another common one is Greg Kuchel's whole book called Tactics, which is mainly a manual on how to rhetorically navigate conversations with non-believers. It's basically just strategy, not really deep thinking or understanding. And because apologetics has to deal with so many types of objections, it does cross over into very deep territories. And so naturally, people will just memorize what apologists tell them without ever really learning the basics of any of the issues that they're actually talking about. This is especially true for scientific topics like cosmology or biology. Now, I grant that some may react a bit defensively toward what I'm saying, and I completely understand. Many Christians see apologists as their heroes. They are champions of the faith. And I once viewed them this way as well. And if you're one of those people, maybe you're thinking right now, why should I take you seriously? And that's fair. But in my videos, I hope to show you why I think apologists have bad arguments and utilize poor reasoning. And while I think this is because Christianity is ultimately not defensible, it's possible to agree with me about most apologists and even apologetics in general, and yet remain convinced that Christianity is true. My hope will be to at least push you to consider better thinkers on both sides, genuine philosophers. And there are some remarkable philosophers who are Christians, some that I deeply respect. In fact, my particular favorite is Josh Rasmussen. Ultimately, we should be guided by where the best reasons and evidence lead, even if that's away from our preferred conclusion. So contra-apologetics does not mean that I'm against God, or even Christianity, at least in some form. I'm actually against this kind of apologetics across the board. I oppose Muslim apologetics, Mormon apologetics, and heck, even atheist apologetics. I really don't think anyone should make it their life's mission to defend a particular position. Now, of course, it may happen that one does end up spending their entire life defending some view, because at every point along the way, the person was convinced that that view was true and that the evidence favored it. The issue is really a matter of one's stance. Are they conclusion-oriented or truth-oriented? For example, I will certainly defend a spherical Earth for my entire life because the evidence overwhelmingly tells us that the Earth is a sphere. It's not because I have a special commitment to a spherical Earth. Now, no doubt many believers think that apologists do what they do because Christianity is true and they just know it. And I, of course, disagree, and I hope to show more clearly why this isn't true as we progress. So that's my little introduction, and I just want to welcome any future viewers that are interested in topics like these. And if you're watching now and you are interested in topics like this, do all the YouTube-y stuff with the liking and the subscribing if you want to. So, yeah, this is me now, and I will hopefully talk to you guys soon, or whoever is listening soon. And I'll try to post fairly regularly, but I'm pretty busy, so this is kind of just an outlet for me. But hope you enjoy it, and you can leave a comment if you want to. And all right, bye.